And you can read it in Acts 2, that Christ was calling his apostles. He was calling people to serve and follow him. And that's really, really important. So old as in original, because a God who's timeless, old and new don't really matter, do they? But then again, they do, because they're everything. However, it's not about the epoch or the age or the time. It's about that universality, that always of being called to follow and work and serve the Lord, the living Lord who comes to us. So that's the old bit. Many, many years ago, our church was formed out of the fragments of all sorts of splinters of churches. We were one time called the Liberal Catholic Church, but that itself came from all kinds of schisms and divisions and we were a smaller version of any other church. I'm going to come to that in just a moment, but first, today we are a dispersed church of part-time volunteer clergy who serve as chaplains, street pastors, supply preachers, prayer group leaders, and all of that sort of thing. And we have some traditional clergy too. We'll come to some of those things as we go. We were a smaller version of every other church. And I've heard some people today say that New Church is in some of those situations that our church was facing in the 1950s and 60s. Our church, when it was the Liberal Catholic Church, was a smaller version of the Roman Catholic Church. And it had buildings, small, dwindling congregations, leaky roofs, and all of the same sort of things that churches today face when it was buildings orientated. And back in some time in the late 60s, but it took a while to do, a fellow called Bishop Eric Solick Taylor, he was the guy that actually turned around our church and said, well, if this isn't working, then more, the same isn't going to work either, we've got to change. He didn't live to see it through, unfortunately, but we have changed from being a church of old and small buildings to a dispersed church of part-time, unpaid ministers that go out onto the street as either street pastors or street preachers, or as visiting preachers to other churches. That is the shift that we made. And we do have some traditional clergy too. Thank goodness. Maybe not. So, we go out on the street and do stuff, because that's important. One of the things that we, I believe, as a modern church need is we need a whole range of approaches, because the very essence of God's creation is in diversity. If you look out of the window, not all flowers are the same. So if we happen to be daffodils, wouldn't it be balmy if we looked over at the roses and said, you're not real flowers because you're not daffodils? I mean, it's absurd, isn't it? So for us to say, oh, we're Protestant, or we're Catholic, or we're Methodist, or we're this, okay, that's great. But, and it's proper and it's right. But to look over and say, well, you're not real church because you're not Baptists, is absurd. And we need, as Christendom, to get over that and understand that our strength is the diversity of what God is calling us to do and calling us to say. Really, really important. So, if you're out on the street and being visible, that we were yesterday,
yes.
that draws attention to things. And that is really, really important, because as apostles, when Christ has called us, we are meant to be witnesses, not just witnesses, but we're also meant to be fishermen and tax collectors. And, well, you get what I'm saying. We've got to be in the world, not of the world, and we need to have a real outreach. That is kind of important. And we've got traditional clergy too, because although we set off to be, is that right, set off? Don't know. although we set off to be a dispersed church, with some growth is coming that people gathering together and wanting to share in places. So in the UK, we don't own a church building. Our counterparts in OCAC Nigeria hugely outnumber us, absolutely hugely. And they've got secondary schools and primary schools and church plants and church buildings. We can't do that here. And perhaps God doesn't want us to do that here for this day and age. So we are dispersed clergy of people working on the street, and we are traditional clergy as well, because actually it's one and the same thing. We've been around for a while, good job too with a name like old, isn't it? We were called the Liberal Catholic Apostolic Church until we changed our name in 2012. And the reason that occurred was because